Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness for themselves, and we will be taking different life cycles and exploring them financially and emotionally, because personal finances are usually not about the money, believe it or not, rather about the emotions that are associated with your finances. Our goal is to look at how to prepare for these life cycles and to thrive on the other side. Although we may have a theme for each show, I can assure you that we're going to speak about different financial strategies that are going to be applicable to many different situations that you're going to face going forward. Although we may be fairly general in our discussion, we would love to hear from you and to make it a little bit more personal. We want to make it as relevant as possible, so please reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial, or the goingsolonetwork.com. Going solo means different things to different people: divorce, death of a loved one, perpetual bachelorhood, and I'm sure there are many more that we are not even going to cover today. We plan on covering all of these and more, just not in today's show. So please continue to listen to future shows. Send us your topics that you'd like to learn more about. Today, we are going to focus mainly on divorce and specifically handling the home. We are navigating such unprecedented times, and we really do need to understand not just our financial picture, but the components within it. And the home plays such a vital role. Your home may actually be the largest financial asset that you have, and it's imperative to work with an expert through the process. And today we certainly have one with us. Our guest for today's show is exactly that, an expert on all things real estate. Our guest is Leslie Glazier, broker at Ad Properties and a certified divorce real estate expert. Hi and welcome, Leslie. How are you?
Hi, Hirsch. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to have you on. And obviously, this is something that's covered very often through the divorce process, but not just in divorce. This is in life cycles as you upgrade with a larger home, as you downsize different parts of your life. You're always looking at real estate and a home. And since the home is such a key asset in a marriage, the home's something that needs a very special attention. So working with an expert is vital to improve your outcome. Leslie, I'm going to ask, can you share a little bit more about what a certified divorce real estate expert is and why would you need one?
It's a great question. I get it a lot. I had a certification with the Alumni Institute, which was a year-long, in-depth master level led by family law attorneys, judges, real estate experts, very intense, and just an amazing experience. I handle real property issues for family law cases. I feel like I've kind of created a better way to help people navigate the world of real estate in transition.
Have you seen, you said you've created a better way to do it. I think people are always nervous to make a big decision to begin with. Yeah. How do you help them in those, getting them comfortable, I guess, a little bit with what you do? And I'm sure part of that is structure of a process and your expertise, but can you just tell one or two things in how you get people comfortable in general with making a big decision?
Sure. I think one of the biggest differences is I come in as a neutral third party. So I am really working for the house and trying to get the house sold. And I'm not picking sides. It's not emotional. I'm not a family friend. Right. I'm not, so that piece is kind of off the table. I don't do a dual agency, so I'm not going to work with, one spouse and not the other one. So I work together. There's a protocol there. So from the very beginning, there's an intake form that I work with, and I can read court orders. I understand them. So there's a protocol of finding out and digging through title documents, mortgage statements. There's so much behind the scenes information that one needs to figure out, and then we need to figure out what they want to do. You know, what is it that you want to do, and is it the need, is it the want, and break it down and see can we do that for you?
Right. So, I mentioned earlier, this could be the largest financial asset that somebody has. And I did a little research. There literally are hundreds of thousands of agents licensed in the US. And that's an enormous number. The number that really was staggering to me is more than 50% of those actually are part-time, which tells me personally, I'm not sure the expertise or the dedication to their client that they always have. I think working in any field with an expert is imperative, and just to go through a process that sometimes can be complicated, add a divorce in the mix of it makes it even more complicated. So working with an expert to take you through that process, I think, is incredibly important. And now we're going to add a global pandemic. We have COVID going on to everything. Has this changed the real estate environment or the way that you navigate through the process? And this could be either on the buying side or the selling side, really.
It has. I mean, well, first of all, the courts are virtual and they're backed up. The good news is attorneys have been more available, which has been fantastic because they're not spending so much time in court. I have a lot of clients who one intended to move out and couldn't, furloughed, for whatever reason, and they are together. And that's been highly stressful to be home with the kids and knowing that, you're going through this kind of separation or divorce. So it's put people in, a hot pot, very stressful situations. I have seen people really rise to the occasion and just get through it.
Right.
And, we're just kind of focusing on the next step. What is your next, part of your life that you're going to hopefully get to soon, as soon as COVID kind of lifts a little bit.
Yeah. And a lot of this is now done online, like closings, things like this. It's not sitting down at a table signing 6,000 documents like it used to be, right? They've changed the way that they're actually closing as well, correct?
Yeah, it's drive-by. So the nice thing is that you get the documents usually in advance. And if you don't get them in advance, you have a time and you pull up traditionally in front of the title company, and they come out and sign, and you wait in your car and then you go. So it's pretty seamless. It's, it's a lot of work for the closers because they're running back and forth outside but it's, everything is DocuSign, sellers don't have to be at the closing. But it's taken away the certainly the kind of the joy of congratulations. I'm not there. I can't be there.
Right. Right.
But on the same side, it can be a good thing if you're going through divorce, because then you're really, everything is virtual.
That can definitely ease a lot of the stress. There's no doubt about that. So, and in my last show, I spoke about building a team. I actually spoke about two teams, one being your emotional team and one being your professional team. When you go through a divorce, and in other situations as well, not just divorce, you should have that. Can you share your thoughts on who should be on your team, and kind of how do you use them as a team versus individuals?
Yes. So it's imperative that I work as a team. I couldn't otherwise. So you've got your real estate, the legal, the emotional, and the finance. And if those don't all work together, it just doesn't work. So probably the most important for me is when I'm meeting clients is to have a financial partner. And, you have been amazing and breaking things down and helping people really take the emotion out and see the business part of what's best for them in the future. And so the financial piece is just imperative, because I think people just don't realize, what exactly it means to, refinance or stay
Right.
or any of that. The emotional piece is, clear that just everyone needs that piece, whether it's a friend or, a professional, and then the legal. So we all need to work together. And I actually even have those puzzle pieces on my website as they kind of fit together in order for us all to work.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can certainly attest to the team player that you are, because we have texted late at night about clients and early in the morning. So I can definitely attest to these aren't just words, these are actions behind the words, which has been a pleasure, because not everybody works in the same way and it's not always so easy. So I can say thank you and appreciate that.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Sometimes people know that they have to sell the home going through a divorce. How does someone who, and realistically, I can look on the internet, I can look at a million things. There's as much good information out there as there's bad information, unfortunately. And the general population, if I can put it that way, they really are not real estate experts.
Sure.
And so how does somebody who's not an expert get comfortable with pricing the home? Is Zillow going to cut it?
That's a loaded question.
It is. But again, that's why we ask the experts and not me.
Zillow is you could take it with a grain of salt. It changes daily. It's not a method algorithm. Mr. Zillow hasn't been to your house. They haven't seen the inside. Right. They don't know the updates. It's interesting because in Cook County, here in Chicago, Zillow rates themselves 2 out of 4 stars.
Wow.
So that should just tell you something. Are you going to, refer your clients to 2-star restaurant or hotel? And
right.
So no, I would not. I actually bring those numbers to my listing appointments to show people how off it can be, or maybe it's on. So I would always recommend getting a fair market value or a CMA, a comparable, from a broker, from someone who's an expert in the area. Most people get appraisals. Appraisals are great for what they are. They're really best for evaluating your loan. They're not always best for evaluating the property. And I think the biggest mistake people make is they're stuck on a number for an appraisal that could have happened 6 months ago, and the market's already changed. I mean, certainly if anyone did an appraisal in February, it's going to be different now.
I was going to say, it doesn't have to be 6 months right now. and I will tell you, that's something that I say with my clients all the time when they say, oh, well, Zillow said. I will say, well, have you spoken to a real estate professional? I do think it's imperative. Even between Realtor.com and Zillow, you can see a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 difference sometimes, which is an enormous difference. And if that's part of your negotiation, so it becomes a big piece. And for those obviously who are contemplating or wanting to keep the home, which is obviously a whole different story from both parties saying let's sell. How do you help them understand whether they really can afford to keep the home or not? I have a lot of conversations on this as well, but the last thing they want, that anybody wants, is to become a slave to their home. I've seen where people kind of set up a situation where they just cannot afford to live because they straddled with this mortgage that's, just they cannot afford anything else. So how do they know for sure that they can afford the home, and how do you help them with that?
It's a good question. A lender is really my partner and my go-to in this. So There's three ways that you can, divide the house, do the house, retain the property. One keeps the house, the other one buys one out. You could sell the house, or you can, defer the sale. But that's really risky when you're both taking the loan and the mortgage. But most of the time, I have one spouse that I'm sure you do too, that wants to keep the house. And what often people don't realize when they say to buy out the other one is they think they're taking over the loan. And they know the amount, and they're like, I can do that. I can take that over. What they don't realize is it's a new loan. A refinance is a brand new loan. Can they qualify for that loan? And what is the number? Because half the equity might be taken out of the spouse to be bought out, and the numbers have, gone much higher. So that's one piece of it. And the nice thing is the lender can look at the big picture and can see, are they even qualified? Have they worked? Do they have enough child support payments to show, proof? What's the income to debt ratio? So even if they do want to, we need to put that on the table from the very beginning, and hopefully they can. If they want to and they can afford it, that's wonderful. But I want everyone to go through that process and be empowered for them to say, yes, this is an educated decision, and yes, I'm going to handle the maintenance of my house, which maybe I never did before. And it's a very big undertaking.
And I think sometimes they forget that it's more than just the house payment that plays in when you talk about the affordability. They look at the mortgage and they go, I can afford the mortgage, and then they forget that maybe they have to furnish it now, or pay for the utilities or the landscaping or repairs or whatever else. So it really is a bigger picture that people sometimes forget about. And unfortunately, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, with condos, you could just have an unknown special assessment. If you're in a building, you could have roof work, but there's just so many large expenses that can come into play.
Right. And I'm glad that you said, most people don't always think there's multiple ways to do this, especially in a divorce. If they're going through something they've never seen before, they think they've got to split everything 50-50 or, whatever it might be. And they don't always get creative around it. But at the same time, they're not always completely realistic about it either, because firstly, they're emotional about the house, but then secondly, there are other emotions obviously playing in when it comes to something like this, which I think is huge in that. And then again, you've just mentioned another person for the team. Obviously, it may not be quite that triangle you spoke about, but it definitely is a member of the team being the right mortgage people, because there are some people that are kind of a sweatshop, no offense, but they are there to originate loans and move them forward. And then you've got other people that really do understand what's going on in a divorce. As you mentioned, the tenure of your maintenance payments, what's going to change. Having to take somebody off the mortgage is just not an option. They should know that. As you said, you've got to actually refi, get a new get a new loan. You can't just continue on the old one and all the rest that comes with that. So I'm going to ask again, I know it's on the screen. I'm going to ask, what's the quickest, easiest way to get in touch with you? If people do have questions or want to work, we're going to take a break after that a little bit. But can you just share the quickest, easiest way to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. My cell, 312-208-3444, or email leslie@atproperties.com.
One of the things that I love about you being with at Properties is their network as well. They do have a network of brokers around the country. So if you're in another country, another state, and you want to work or get some expertise through Leslie, that reach out. There are things that they can do to help you in your state as well, which I think is great as well. Again, I am Hirsch Sermon, and you can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. We're going to take a short break, pay some bills. We'll be back very, very shortly. Thanks. All right, welcome back. We are on the Going Solo Network, WGSN-DB, and my guest today is Leslie Glazier with At Properties. She's a broker and certified divorce real estate specialist. So we spoke quite a bit about building your team, understanding what you can afford, how to handle both selling and buying. That's a lot in 20 minutes. We covered even more than that. One of the big buzzwords right now, though, is forbearance in the industry. And, you know, on my show about 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that the historical use of forbearance has been about 0.5% to 0.75% of people that have mortgages. We're currently at over 8%. And 2 weeks ago, we were only at about 6%. So you can see it's not slowing down by any means. It's definitely huge. My fear around this, sometimes I think people are doing things that they just don't really understand what they're getting into. Absolutely. So I'm going to ask if you can talk a little bit about forbearance and help people understand a little bit more.
Sure. I've had several clients who have reached out to me and asked me about forbearance. And our discussion basically is, do you understand that this is not something that is going to go away? You have to repay it. So what usually happens is the bank will give you 3-month or 6-month break. But after that, you need to either pay that back in a lump sum, or you need to, prorate it out and pay it each month. And the hard part about that is if you have to apply for something like this or think that you need to do this, that if you don't have the money for those 3 months, it's probably unlikely that you're going to have that money plus more in 3, 4, 5 months. Sometimes the lender will put it on the back of the loan, and people forget that, when they go to sell, they've got this huge chunk need to pay off. And that's a big deal. One of the biggest things that I think people don't realize is you cannot apply for a new loan for a year.
I was hoping you were going to mention this.
That's a big one. It's a big one.
Yes.
And, that's so far been a surprise to everybody that I have told this to. And it's not something that the banks certainly announce, or I wish they would, but I haven't heard that yet. Yeah. So it's
and I mean, just putting a little more perspective with that 12 months, the average divorce runs somewhere in the 10-month range. Mm-hmm. So if you in the middle of a process or you're contemplating, and one of the things, as we discussed earlier, is you will have to refinance, one of you, if you keep the home and both of you are on that mortgage, that's not going to happen in the time frame of your divorce potentially, which adds another layer of complication in settling everything out.
And it can really, just work on your credit in a very negative way.
Correct. Absolutely.
And
sometimes,
it's better to, talk to the bank and maybe just make a lesser payment if possible, make something.
Right. Yeah, and I think not everybody, but it can get very expensive, a divorce, and that already can put pressure on your credit. Yeah. You add something like this, and going into something that you don't really understand can just make things that much more complicated for yourself as well. So
yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, and so I guess we've talked about a few different things here. I'm going to ask, if somebody does keep the home, there are many items that they need to take into consideration. One of them is the probability of having to refinance, especially if both of them are on the mortgage, but even more so, they may have to refinance just to buy the other party out. Any just general thoughts when it comes to that you'd like to share when it comes to kind of transitioning the home from one spouse to another? And this is title, mortgage, maintenance, you name it, whatever you want. There's a lot that you can pick from. So any just general thoughts you'd like to share there with people in that?
Yeah, it's that's the biggest that's the biggest, issue that I have with my clients, identifying the needs versus the positions.
So,
Very important to have the lender take that piece out, the emotional piece out, and get what's on the table in terms of, what can you afford? There's so many little nuances that people don't realize. One of the most important things that I don't think people understand is that you need to pay consistently your child support. So, and you need to track receipts. If a lender cannot track all of those receipts, then you will have a very hard time getting a loan. And what I hear over and over again is, well, my spouse just, instead of paying me the child support, they paid the visa bill, or they paid school or whatever. And the lender cannot track that. So that really hurts you. So one of the most important pieces is, just make sure there's a consistency in payments and that it's all trackable. The other piece is, obviously, what can you afford? You've got, generally half the income. When you applied for a loan, you might have had both of you, and now there's only one of you. And do you even want to put all of this energy and money into keeping this home when you think it's maybe for the kids? But what is the best for the family? What is the best for you? And sometimes it is staying in the same school district, in the same house for consistency. And other times it's just too much of a strain, and or you just simply can't afford it.
I think you touched on a couple things that are so vital there. The emotions that play in, I've mentioned to many clients, when I was getting divorced, my attorney, literally the first thing he said to me and the first advice was, this is a business that you are dissolving, that you are emotionally attached to.
So true.
There's a lot of emotions around the house. This is where my kids grew up, whatever it might be. Could be your first home. There's a lot of things. And I'm not sure people, always look at it as a financial transaction, unfortunately. And, not that you could call me a cold, heartless MBA CPA, but I do understand the emotions. I've been through it as well. And I had a home involved in, and so, definitely didn't have all the information I do now, years and years later of working in it. But I think sometimes people hide behind the emotions in order to kind of make the decision they emotionally want to, as opposed to really evaluating it. And sometimes those emotions are not about them. Supposedly it's, I want consistency for the children. This is where they've, known the house, they've grown up and things like that. And
Sure.
so I think sometimes also working with someone like yourself or having an expert that can really lay certain things out for them objectively can be invaluable long-term for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I say this, I'm not sure if we've ever shared this, but I know I've said to many people, this is the first, your divorce anyway, is the first chapter in the rest of your life, not the last chapter in this part of your life. It really does set up how you're going to live going forward. And it's more than the finances. It's your home, it's the finances, but it's also your co-parenting, your relationship with your children, and all the rest. So really bringing in that expert, I think sometimes is an enormous piece that plays in when it comes to all of this as well. Most people, I don't know how many times you probably have this statistic, but most people probably buy and sell a home, 2, maybe 3 times in a lifetime. It's not something they're familiar with. I'm sure things changed over time. And not only that, but I would imagine, especially in the last 3 months, have changed very rapidly, as you were kind of talking about.
Yes.
I'm going to ask, can you just also, and maybe we should have started a little bit with this, but can you give a little bit of an overview of the actual process? Like, I need to sell my home or contemplating selling my home. What do I do? How do I get it ready? How do I get it on the market? And ultimately, kind of move out. If you can give a
Yeah.
little bit of an overview with your experience, I think would be helpful as
Sure.
well for people.
Well, in a divorce situation, I tend to meet with the parties separately. So I'll get a tour of the house, generally 20 minutes. I need to see what's there. Are half the rooms furniture gone? What's the deferred maintenance? So I want to get a feel for the home. And then I will meet with the other spouse. Used to be in my office, now it's in Zoom. And I do an intake. So I want to get the lay of the land. I want to know if there's any court orders,
Right.
what's there. And what's the status right now of where they are? Because sometimes the divorce is final when they call me, and other times they're just interested in getting, a value, which is totally fine. I mean, I'm happy to do that. And a lot of times I'll give them a value and they stay, and that's great if they can. So we meet separately, and traditionally, if they want to meet together, great. We get a value together. We really talk a lot about deferred maintenance. And one of the most important things that I like to do is to try to build up a trust between us and make sure they can agree with me. They don't have to agree with each other, but they have to agree with me. And as much as we can get done before an offer comes in, the better. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page, and I want to check off every single box. I want to know if there is deferred maintenance. Are we going to handle it now? Are we selling the property as is? Because the less they have to agree on in the end, the better.
Right.
So a sticking point for me is that a mortgage statement, I know I'm going up on a tangent, but a mortgage statement is not enough for me to go on what the equity of the home is. We need to get a payoff letter, because a lot of people forget that they might have had a loan modification or a balloon payment or something. So
right.
If everyone, the attorneys, everyone is talking about this magic number that they're going to get when they sell, we need it to be a realistic one. So I want to cover all those bases from the very beginning. We put a value on the property. I let them know how I'd want to market it. Do we need to do any staging? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to do any maintenance issues? Give them an expectation, especially right now of, with COVID,
right.
what needs to be done. The good news right now, what I've found, Hirsch, is that it's kind of taken away the lookers. So buyers are very educated on it first. They must see the tours, the videos, sometimes sign a COVID disclosure if the listing agent requires it. So the people that are coming into the properties are super serious, and they have to be pre-approved. So there's a lot of steps to go through before one enters into a property.
Right.
So I'm finding, that most of the people that are coming into a property are, making offers or close to it. So that's a completely different world than where we were months ago.
And I'm going to I'll ask you to touch a little bit more or elaborate a little bit more on how you're showing the house. Obviously, there's not, the Sunday balloons at the end of the street with an open house sign right now. So can you just touch so that people understand, like, this is kind of what they're going to have to do to, if they're serious about buying as well?
On the flip side of purchasing, what they need to do?
Yeah.
So it's very important to get a pre-approval from a lender to know what they can afford. That's number one. And a lot of brokers will not let buyers into the property unless they are pre-approved, which makes sense at this point. I would say over half of the properties, the brokers have done virtual tours. So it's important to look at floor plans, look at the tours, get as much information online as possible. Ask your broker, is there anything else about the property you can find out? I create a feature page for each property I have that gives the nitty gritty and detail on everything about the mechanicals, the appliances. So they know the age of things. So there's a lot of background that they can do. They can also request a tour from the listing brokers. The listing broker can walk around. I've done a lot of live streams where I've walked them around. If there's a tenant in there, the seller doesn't want anyone in, and I could, showings can take an hour and a half when I'm sitting there with my camera showing everything. But it's lightening up a little bit. Let's wear a mask, and we try to, obviously sanitize, not touch anything, and sanitize everything right before we leave.
Yeah, it definitely is different. I know when I bought my house, I kind of would drive by and I'd be like, oh, open house, let me just see, and pop in kind of thing. And it's definitely very different. I also I know I said it earlier, but I just want to reiterate, we speaking about divorce predominantly now. A lot of these things, as I said, forbearance and refinancing and all these kind of things obviously apply beyond just the divorce as well. And I just want to highlight that Leslie does not just deal with divorce, but any person who needs to sell a home can utilize her services in that way. And again, they do have that fantastic network around the country, so we can always get referrals from that perspective as well. Again, Leslie, we're starting to kind of wind down and wrap up. So do me a favor, if you would, just share your contact info again. I know it's on the screen, but it's nice to hear it as well, if you would. And how do people get in touch with you?
Sure. My cell, 312-208-3444. My email is Leslie, Leslie, at atproperties.com. And my website is leslieglazier.com.
Great, thank you. And I will tell you, on the finance side, I see often, I can tell you that it's easy to get into a situation that complicates a divorce even more. There's a lot of moving parts already. Most people are not familiar with it. They're emotional and stressed, and the home is one of the big ones that can complicate it even more. I always run through several scenarios. I've had people come to me saying, when do we sell the home? And we've ended up negotiating to keep it. I've seen people that want to keep it and negotiate it as a piece to get what they really want and need. So running through various scenarios with clients, I just think it is very important that they really do understand everything completely. I highly recommend working with Leslie or someone like Leslie in your neighborhood. It really helps you be more objective, get real numbers. You mentioned earlier how things change, numbers change every day. I literally have a case right now where the one spouse said to the other, well, this was the appraisal we got, and it's almost 2 years old now, that appraisal. So you can imagine. You've heard some fantastic information here today coming from Leslie. And Leslie, I'm going to ask for just some closing thoughts real quick. Anything we didn't touch on, we've covered a lot of things, but anything that we didn't cover that you think would be helpful for somebody, and then just again to do a shout out on your info, if you would.
Sure. Well, there's two things that kind of came to mind. One is, something that you certainly can help with is the tax ramifications of it all. And that's really an important piece to look at. Are there capital gains? What's the big picture? The other one, and I went through this in my own divorce, and this is before I was in real estate. The inspection is a huge issue. And what sometimes doesn't happen, with the attorneys is who pays for the deferred maintenance for those few years. And if a buyer, asks for a $5,000, $10,000 credit, whatever it might be, who is paying for that? And that needs to be something that's very clearly drawn out. And that seems to be kind of a fuzzy piece,
right?
When I'm selling, and that would really help, divorcing spouses make things a little bit clearer, and there's certainly less to disagree about.
That's always a good thing, for sure. So, well,
The inspection.
Leslie, thank you for joining me. You have a way of making not so simple things sound a lot more simple, which I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your insights. That definitely makes it easier. I am Hirsch Sermon, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please do reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial, or you can email me, hirsch@lifecycle.financial. That's HIRSCH@lifecycle.financial. Please reach out with questions for me or for Leslie, our guest today. I look forward to you joining me for my next show. Our guest will be Sherry Morris, who's a mediator, divorce coach, and co-founder of Recompose Us. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Come back in 2 weeks. We'll be covering more good stuff. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Hirsch.
Thanks.